glad that you're with us. At Bow Valley Christian Church, as you leave the building this morning, if you look up before you walk through the doors, you'll see our mission statement. It's just a way for us to describe what we're here to do. And we put it like this. It's just a reframing of Jesus' Great Commission. But we put it this way. We are here to help people find and follow Jesus. I like the simplicity of that we're actually helping people, and we're helping them find Jesus, not that he's lost, but to help them open their eyes to where he is in their life. And we are trying to help people to follow Jesus. So our mission is not just to announce the good news of Jesus. That's a great thing to do, but our mission is more than that. Our mission is not just to convert people to Christianity. That's a great thing to do, but our mission is bigger than that. Our mission is actually to help people follow Jesus, to live in a certain way that we think is a great way to live life, the best way to live life. And so at this church, this is what we are constantly trying to do. And practically, it looks like this. We're trying to help people take their next step in following Jesus. For years, as a minister, I wondered, what does it actually mean to be a follower of Jesus? Like, how do you measure that? How do you get a handle on that? And one way that we try to understand that is using 4 words. And you see them on the banners, and this week you see them on the stage. 4 dimensions or ways in which we think that if you take your next step in these areas, you will be following Jesus. And so sometimes we put it like this, that Jesus is the center, and that one of the ways that we follow Jesus and help each other follow Jesus is that we grow in our relationship to Jesus. Another way is that we belong in Jesus' family, that being a follower of Jesus is not something that you do on your own, but you actually belong to a local group. Another word that we use is the word invest. And by that we mean that we ask people to intentionally invest their lives in the kingdom of Jesus. And then fourthly, that we shine the love of Jesus. Not just sharing, presenting the message of Jesus, but also being the presence of Jesus in the world. And so for the next month or so, we're just going to sort of refresh ourselves about these ways in which we follow Jesus and that are part of the purpose of why we exist as a church. And today, we'll start with this one, grow. And to consider the idea of growing in our relationship with Jesus, I want to take you to the story that Jesus, the metaphor that Jesus gives us in John chapter 15. And the setting is this. Jesus has been in the upper room. He has washed the disciples' feet. He has had the meal together with the disciples that we would call the Last Supper. And they finished the Last Supper, and Jesus knows that he doesn't have much time left with his followers. He knows that time is running out. He's in his final hours. And so they leave the upper room sort of in the cool of the evening, and they're making their way to the Garden of Gethsemane. And Jesus knows that he will be arrested there, and he will go on from there to eventually be beaten and to be crucified and risen again. And he knows what's coming for him, and he knows what's coming for his followers. What would you say if you know that your time is running out? What would you say to the people who are closest to you? Well, he knows that these disciples are going to be charged with living out the kingdom of God. And they're going to be charged with the same mission we have, to make disciples of all of the world. And he also knows that his followers, his closest friends, are going to face tremendous persecution. And life is going to be very difficult for them. And all but one of them are actually going to be martyred. We know that through history. He knows that they're going to face incredible obstacles and moments of doubt and moments of opposition. And I think all of this is in Jesus' mind as he makes that journey from the upper room to the garden, knowing that there's a cross in front of them. And I think Jesus is saying, what am I going to tell these guys? What can I say that they will remember? What can I say that will give them direction and hope as they go out to do their mission. And he doesn't give them a 5-year plan, and he doesn't give them a book. He gives them a metaphor. And it's a powerful metaphor, and it's the one that I want us to open our scriptures to this morning. And it comes in John chapter 15, and this is what Jesus says. He's walking with his followers. Maybe he saw a vineyard, and he says this, "I am the true vine, and my Father is the gardener. He cuts off every branch in me that bears no fruit, while every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes, so that it will be even more fruitful. You are already clean because of the word I have spoken to you. Remain in me, as I also remain in you. No branch can bear fruit by itself. It must remain in the vine. Neither can you bear fruit unless you remain in me." And then this line, "I am the vine, you are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. If you do not remain in me, you are like a branch that is thrown away and withers. Such branches are picked up, thrown into the fire, and burned." And from this, the main point that I want you to get this morning, that I see in this verse and that relates to how we are to grow in our relationship with Jesus, is a very simple point. I think you can grasp it. The main point is this: be the branch. That's our mission. When it comes to connecting with Jesus, we are the branch, and he is the vine. So you know the picture, in case you're not familiar with vineyards. I'm not that familiar with them. The vine grows up from the ground, and through the vine come all of the nutrients and all of the things that are needed for fruit to be produced, and the vine provides the nutrients and the life to the branch. And as long as the branch stays connected to the vine, the branch can produce fruit. It will get the nutrients to produce fruit. And in John chapter 15, we see, this is actually, if you read the whole chapter, which is a powerful chapter to read, we see this in the next 11 verses. There's actually 11 times Jesus uses this same word over and over again. He uses the word remain. Did you catch it, even in what I read there? Remain in me. Remain in me. The old word that we sang is the word abide. Stay connected to me. Be the branch. Stay connected. I am the vine. You are the branch. Stay connected, and you will produce fruit. If you don't stay connected, you will not produce fruit. I think as a church family, you could put it this way, whatever else we get right, we're wrong if we get this wrong. Because our primary focus as a church is to stay connected to Jesus. Without him, there will not be the fruit that he desires in this world. That's what Jesus is saying. We have to stay connected. We have to be the branch. In other words, you are not the vine, you are not the source, you are not the power, you are the branch. Your job is to stay connected to the vine. You with me? I'm not sure you are. It's early in the morning. Why don't you turn to someone next to you and just say, be the branch. Be the branch, okay? You're not the vine, be the branch. Pretty simple. Here's some implications of what it might mean to live the branch life. One is this: if you are going to bear fruit, and all of us want to bear fruit in our life, bear fruit in our character, bear fruit through what we do, through how the words that we say, and Jesus is reminding them of this truth. He's reminding them who they are. And he says, you are the branch, and then he reminds them of what their job is to do. Their job is to remain. Interesting, isn't it? The priority for Jesus here is that connection to him comes before production. Connection before production. That living the branch life means that we're redefining success not by what we do, but by who we are connected to. Do you see? It's not about what I do, it's about who I'm connected to. I was thinking about this sort of tension sometimes that we feel, that I feel, between connection and production. It's true in all of our relationships, isn't it? We often have a choice. Are you going to produce things, or are you going to connect with people? And for me, and this will be no surprise to any of you who know me, I underestimate the value of connecting, and I overestimate the value of producing. Is anybody else with me on this? Yeah, thank you. So I could go for a walk with my spouse or my friends, but then I know that would be a good thing to do, but as I'm about to think about going for a walk outside, remember when there was grass? I think about going for a walk, and as I go out the door, I think, wait a minute, this lawn needs to be cut. And immediately, what do? I have a choice. It's right in front of me. Do I connect or do I produce? Which way am I going to do? And most of the time, I go for production, right? Because, why? I like the feeling at the end of the day to look out at the grass and say, I did it. I cut it. I've accomplished something, right? But if I choose connection, I go for a walk with my spouse or I go for a walk with my friends, even though I cognitively know that connection is important, it doesn't feel like I accomplished anything. It's too intangible. I don't necessarily see the fruit of it right away. This is true as a parent. As a dad, I have some different options. Do I play catch, or do I go for coffee with my kids? Or do I do all of these errands that are just waiting for me to do, that need to be taken care of? My tendency, production rather than connection. Well, Jesus is talking spiritually here, and what he is saying is that in our relationship with him, he's inviting us to stay connected first, and he will bring the fruit. He will bring the production. Now, for a lot of us, this is pretty challenging, because there's lots of things that we would like to produce. But what he's suggesting here, or inviting you to do as the branch, is to think of the things in your life where you would like to bear fruit. What kind of fruit would you like in your life? Jesus would say the way to get that fruit is not by trying harder for the fruit. It's to stay connected to the vine. It's a very different focus, isn't it? I'll tell you when this becomes clear to me. As a minister, it becomes clear to me every time I do a funeral. Because funerals require a meeting. And one day there's going to be a meeting about you and a meeting about me. And here's how the meeting goes. The pastor calls up the family and says, listen, can we get together before the service? It's quite a meeting. And usually when I get together with the family, the person who's passed away, I'll ask them to, tell me about the person who passed away. Like, what was life like? How did you see them? What were they like? It's kind of a broad question, and oftentimes it's met with silence. So I'll ask another question. Well, tell me a little bit more, get a little focused here. What were they known for? And that's when the conversation starts. Well, they are known for these hobbies. They're known for these accomplishments. They love to work on cars. She loved to bake. She loved to decorate. He started a business and then sold a business and then bought another business. And he was great at this sport, and she was great at looking after children. All of the things that they produced are listed. Nothing's wrong. But I'll tell you what happens in those meetings. In every single one of them, you can tell that when we describe the person's accomplishment, everybody in the room knows those things don't mean much at that moment. I won't say her name, but there's one funeral that stands out for me. It was a lady who was relatively young, and she had cancer it was at least 5 years, and it was awful, the decline, excruciating. And when she passed, I asked the question, what was she known for? See, the people who were gathered, her family. And they answered in a way that I hadn't heard before. Nobody listed her accomplishments because her sight, her hearing, there wasn't much. But then an uncle of hers said, my prayer life will never be the same because of the way she prayed for me. And a sibling said, she taught me to be grateful and stop complaining. And a friend said, she taught me that faith can be real in the worst situations. And they went on. And they didn't talk about accomplishments. They didn't talk about production. They talked about connection. And this lady had been very faithful to Jesus till the end. And I asked this question. I said, well, what word would you use? This is good fodder for a funeral sermon. What word would you use to describe her? Like, what would you say? What's the first word that comes to mind? And somebody said, peace. Oh, that's interesting. 5 years, different hospital treatments, all the things that she went through, different surgeries, unspeakable disappointment. And she was known for peace. Another person kind of went around the room, different people nodding their heads at this. Another person said selflessness. Another person said patience. Another person said kindness. Another person said faithfulness. She stuck with God all the way through. And then somebody said joyful. And if that list sounds familiar, it did to me. Those are the fruit. Because in Galatians chapter 5, Paul is kind of riffing on Jesus' statement in John 15, I think, and he lists the fruit of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, gentleness, faithfulness, self-control. That's what was produced in her and will be produced in us if we stay connected. And so my challenge to you this week is just measure. What would it be like if you measured your significance and you measured your success not by what you accomplished this week, but on who you connect to? And Jesus is saying who you connect to determines what you produce. Some of you would love to have more kindness and patience and peace in your life, and you're working hard at it. And Jesus would say, be the branch. Just stay connected to me. And that's why as a church, so much of what we do and so much effort and resources is put into this grow part of our mission because we want to help people remain in Him. Here's some ways at Bow Valley that we kind of approach it. This way. Sunday gatherings. What are we doing here this morning? Through our songs, through communion, through the teaching. We're trying to help each other remain in Him, aren't we? We're trying to connect with Him. How else do we do this? We do this with Bible classes. There's several throughout the week that take place, and more happening all the time. We do this with classes that happen. There's classes happening at the 9 o'clock service. There's classes happening at the 11 o'clock service that are going down. We do this with intentional mentoring programs, radical mentoring. We have programs going for women. We have rules of engagement going for men. We have intergenerational mentoring happening. We have constant prayer gatherings, pre-service, post-service, throughout the week, several times during the evenings. We have prayer by the elders. We have prayer by the staff. Prayer constantly going on. Opportunities for you to get involved. Tons of resources, online resources, sermon resources, right now media resources. Why? Why would we do all of this? So that you can be the branch. Be the branch. But here's the thing. In this passage, it's not just about what we do to remain. Jesus also says God's at work in this. And so we read it right at the start. Here's how he puts it. I am the true vine, and my Father is the what? Gardener. He cuts off every branch in me that bears no fruit, while every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes so that it will be even more fruitful. So the picture of this, I have a friend Gordon, who went to a vineyard and describes it like this. He said, if you go to a vineyard during pruning time, and that happens every year, if you go to an actual vineyard, it looks like a disaster. Because the gardener is going through the vineyard at pruning time, and he's attacking the poor plant. It looks like he's trying to kill the poor plant. He's cutting off all of this stuff. It looks like it should never be taken off. Beautiful bits of branches and leaves that are just being cut off. Even clusters of grapes that are disappearing. And when you look at the branch itself, it looks like it's bleeding. In hundreds of places, it's been cut. It looks horrible. From the untrained eye, it looks like pruning is a massacre. It looks like the branch is never going to survive this. It looks like everything that has been taken off is a pointless waste of time. Why would all those things be done? Everything has to be taken off. Why? Well, the person who's doing the pruning would say, so that the plant can reach its fullness, so that it can reach its potential. And Jesus is saying, get this, friends, he's saying that in your life and my life, these things will happen to you. Trouble will happen. Difficulties will happen. Things will be taken out of your life. And you look at them with a sort of an untutored eye, and you look at all of these things, you say, this is a pointless waste. Why is all of this happening? There's no reason why I should not have gotten into that school and not have gotten that job and lost that person. There's no reason that this should ever have happened to me. And Jesus says, well, that's because you don't understand gardening. And notice what he says, my Father is the gardener. And the Father's pruning will produce fruit if you remain in him, if you be the branch. Because what happens? When all of that pruning takes place, that branch is forced to depend on the vine. It's forced to draw the nutrients out of the vine. It's forced to draw life out of the stem, the trunk. It's forced to draw on the vine. The more that these things happen, it's forced to draw from the vine, which in turn gives greater life and produces more fruit. And that's how this lady that I was talking about, I think how she lived her life. The more difficult life got, the more she drew on the love of God for her. The more she drew on the hope of her eternity with him. I talked a few weeks ago about the movie City Slickers, which some of you had never heard of before. Yeah, it's probably just as well. But it got me thinking about another 80s movie that kind of pictures this really well for me. And some of you, well, you'll know this one because, it was a good movie. And you know it's a good movie when the spin-offs just keep coming 20 and 30 years later. And some of you remember the original Karate Kid. Do you remember this movie? And in the original Karate Kid, now there's I actually read the other day that there's a new one coming out again called The Legend of Karate Kid, and Jackie Chan's in it. And they're still trying after the TV show because clearly it made some money. And one of the scenes in the original Karate Kid is the scene with Mr. Miyagi. Do you remember this? Some of you do. Some of you older folks. And the scene goes like this. There's a scene where Mr. Miyagi is trimming a bonsai tree. And bonsai is actually not a tree. It's an art form, really, that makes things smaller and so forth. And he's snipping and he's cutting and he's pruning. And it's pretty small, but he's making it even smaller. And Daniel, the Karate Kid, is trying to say, Mr. Miyagi, what are you doing? It looks like you're just hacking this thing up. What are you trying to do with it? And Mr. Miyagi says this line. He says, I have a picture in my head. And then he says, you have to trust the picture when the pruning takes place. Otherwise, you'll be too scared. You won't cut anything. You have to trust the picture that you have in your mind when the pruning occurs. Listen, there's pruning going on in this room. The Father is pruning, isn't he? And some of you feel like things have been cut away and taken off and removed. And it seemed like they were doing just fine, thank you. And Jesus says, my Father is the gardener. And he's the one doing the pruning. And he's pruning with a picture in his mind. A picture of who you can be and the kind of fruit that you can produce. He's pruning, but he sees it. And when the pruning comes, you have to trust that the gardener has a picture. And what's the picture? The picture is that in your personality, in who you are, in who God made you to be, you can become like Jesus. You can have the fruit of love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness, self-control. He's got that picture in mind. Trust the pruning. If you remain, the things that come into your life actually force you to draw on the vine. And the results of the pruning will cause you to look more like the picture God intends your life to be. Well, almost done with this part of the verse. Jesus does say one more thing that I think we better mention. He says, if you remain in me, if you be the branch, you will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. That's sobering. How many of us know that's true? And then he says this, if you do not remain in me, you're like a branch that is thrown away and withers. Such branches picked up, thrown in the fire, and burned. So you could put it this way. You are either a branch or you are a stick. What is a stick? A stick used to be a branch, but now it's just a stick. It's not producing anything. There's nothing to it. You're either a branch or you're a stick. Well, I started to let my imagination kind of carry on and thought, if Jesus gave us this metaphor of vine and branches and sticks, what if we took it a little step further? And what if we imagined this morning that we were in a vineyard, snowless vineyard? Are you there? And imagine that you're walking through the orchard, and as you walk along, you've been given a job. And your job is to pick up the branches that are no longer branches but are now sticks. And so your job is just to walk through and pick up the sticks, gather them together so you can get rid of them. I had this picture and I thought of the people in my life that I've known and people who were once connected that aren't. All these branches that are now sticks. And imagine that you're walking through and you're picking up these sticks, one stick after another, and you have this thought, you know what? Every stick that used to be a branch has a story. Every stick has a story. A story of how it went from being a branch to being a stick. Like there's a story to it. A story of how you went from being a branch to a stick, how you got disconnected from the vine. And so you walk around, you're picking up sticks, and you think, what's the story of this stick? What's the story of this stick? Used to be connected. And using my imagination, I thought of a couple reasons why, a couple stories. One is that sometimes the branch became a stick because a storm came through. Right? You ever done that? You walk out in your front yard, maybe after a really windy storm, and there's branches on your lawn, there's branches on your driveway, and now they're sticks. They're not anything. They were connected. They were the branch. But then difficulty came along, the wind came up, and the storm exposed how small the connection was between the branch and the vine, and now they're a stick. Storms have a way of showing that, don't they? And then I thought, well, what else would cause a branch to become a stick? Well, some branches that become sticks do so because the branch got an infection. It got a disease, right? And became kind of brittle and started from the inside until it infected the whole branch. And you can see this on trees. They look like the branches, they look like they're stressed out. Sometimes the leaves will kind of turn a different color, and it could be an insect, it could be an infection. The berries or the fruit starts to sort of shrivel up and dry up, and the branch starts to rot from the inside out, and eventually it just falls down. And now it's a branch that became a stick. Sad stick story, isn't it? And I just thought to myself, there's a lot of people that I once knew that were connected to the vine. And something on the inside, some kind of infection, came into their life. We would call it sin. And it was left unchecked. And it just kind of took over. And it was left, and it was just justified, and it was minimized. And a lot of sad stick stories involve unexpected storms and unchecked sin. Isn't that true? And I can't help but think of the people who are not in this room today who tell that story with their lives. And so, I don't mean to be too heavy here, but I do want to ask you this question. Where are you today? If you were to say, are you a stick? Like, are you disconnected? Or are you like, no, I'm a branch, Steve. I'm over here. I'm fully connected. I'm doing what it takes. I'm doing whatever it takes to stay connected. Even though it feels like the pruning is killing me, I'm staying connected. Like, where do you think you are? Some of you are like, hey, I'm over here, man. I was the stormy stick. I'm on the ground. Or maybe you're here this morning and you just feel like, I get the church stuff, but connection to Jesus, not so much. I wonder where you're at in this season. No matter where you are, here's what I would like to say as we come to the end of this message. I'd just like to say that Jesus, when he gave us this metaphor, was on his way to the cross. And he was walking through these vineyards to the Garden of Gethsemane. He would be arrested and then beaten and then crucified. And the conversation that we just looked at happens on the way to the cross. Here's why it matters. Because one way of thinking about it is that what Jesus did on the cross is that he proves to us that sticks can become branches. Isn't that true? He died so that what is dead could live again, right? He died to all of us who feel like we're a stick and our fruit-bearing days are over, or we've given up on the idea of fruit. He died so that we could actually have hope of being a branch again. You could put it this way. On the cross, Jesus made a way for sticks to become branches. I like that. Sticks to branches. There's actually a process. There's a picture of it there. And the process goes like this. It's called grafting. Basically, they take a branch and they surgically, looks like they're completely injuring it. Like to connect a branch to a tree or to a plant, the gardener will cut a V-shaped wedge into the vine. Now, remember the picture here. Jesus is the vine. God is the gardener. They cut into the vine. It's called bleeding. The gardener makes the vine bleed. Why? So that the branch can be grafted in, can be brought back to life again. And so then the gardener takes the branch, you can see him doing this, takes the branch, strips it of all its twigs, strips it of all the extra garbage, cleans it up, puts it in the place where the vine is bleeding, and then the gardener seals the stick and the vine together with wax or some other kind of connection. And what happens? Well, the vine bleeds, the stick becomes morphed in, and over time, the branch that was once a stick starts to draw nutrients from the vine. The flow of nutrients and life comes in, and eventually, what was once a stick becomes part of the vine and bears fruit. Do you see? I don't mean to put too much of a point on it, but Jesus bled so that sticks could become branches. Jesus died so that sticks could become branches that would bear fruit. And I just thought this morning of us gathered here on this cold day and thought about what we celebrate together. In some sense, we celebrate that Jesus is the vine, and we were a bunch of sticks that became branches so that we can bear fruit to the glory of God.